Now, I want to take you back to December 14th, 1986. And we're sitting in the cockpit of this airplane, and we're looking down a long runway at Edwards Air Force Base. It's the longest runway in the free world, and on the other end of this 3-mile runway is a beautiful dry lake called Muroc Dry Lake. And if something happens to this takeoff roll of this airplane, then maybe we can survive by landing out in the dry lake someplace.
Word of the Voyager project quickly spread. Volunteers migrated from all over the world to help this dream become reality. Each had a special task, and without their good work, this flight could never have been achieved.
Anyway, we did work real hard, and we physically built this airplane. We got the very finest carbon fiber from Hercules. We went up to their autoclaves up in Salt Lake City, spent 5 weeks. We laid up the spars in an autoclave that would give us a little bit more strength in the structure of the airplane. And then we started flying the airplane. One of the first times we flew the airplane, I remember taking off, and it's the only time the airplane ever flew with only one person. It's called high risk, and you get to do high risk alone. You look around the cockpit and you're by yourself, and there's probably a reason for that. I took off, and the airplane seemed to fly okay, but I looked down and I saw the strangest shadow. And for the first time I realized, this is really a weird airplane. Look at the shadow that it caused. I'm flying an airplane that makes that shadow.
After considerable on-the-spot engineering, challenges were overcome. Dick complained to Bert about the terrible turning qualities of the aircraft when it had a heavy load, and about the horrible handling qualities in the rain.
The airplane was highly compromised for range. Highly compromised for range. That means the vertical tails were just barely big enough to keep it going in the straight direction. And sometimes when you try to turn the airplane, the dihedral and the adverse yaw would make it turn back the opposite direction. I remember the first time I went into a real steep bank, and the Voyager about 20 degrees is a steep bank. And I tried to roll out, and it yawed a little bit and rolled back the opposite direction. So the more I turned it to the right, the faster it turned to the left. And finally, we neutralized everything, tried something else, made it lighter, went into kind of 0G to roll the airplane out. And I told Bert about that. He says, Dick, he says, remember, it's mission adequate flying qualities. I says, yeah, Bert. Then he says, Dick, he always says that to me when, when he thinks that I need to know something because I'm, well, whatever. He says, Dick, it's a world flight. It doesn't have to turn at all. During one of the test flights, we flew into a little rain shower. And in the high desert of Mojave, there's not a lot of rain, so we flew into the rain. And the canard is a very special airfoil, highly loaded airfoil. So when we hit the rain, it disturbed the lift of the canard, and the nose started down, and it started heading for the desert. And not a thing I could do with the elevator or with the throttle or anything that we could recover from the dive. And right away, I could tell that there wasn't enough time to turn this big airplane around and fly out of it before we hit the desert floor. And I told Gina, get your parachute on, because you're getting out. And I ordered her to bail out of the airplane, because I didn't think we were going to make it. And she says, what are you going to do? And I says, well, I'm going to stay with the airplane. So she put her parachute away and says, I'm staying too. Well, fortunately, the rain quit, and we flew through the little shower, and it pulled out. And I'm not saying we pulled out in the weeds, but it was low enough to be out of control that it made you somewhat nervous. So I landed and went back, and fortunately for my brother's life, he wasn't there at the airport. I called him on the phone. And I says, Bert, and I told him what happened, and his response was, don't fly in the rain. I says, Bert, we're going around the world at the equator. You know how much rain and bad weather is around the world? Anyway, we had a lot of fun, but the one that I liked the best was the size of the fuselage. Now, the bigger, the fatter the fuselage, and more comfortable it is, that means that the airplanes go slower, and it has more drag, and it has less range. So he designed the cockpit, he said, just big enough for us to survive the flight and the required 48 hours you have to live afterwards. And he says, if you live longer than the flight and the required 48 hours after the flight, obviously it was too big and we just had wasted range capability.
Finally, after nearly 6 years of design, building, and flight tests, it was time to make the attempt.
So Gene and I crawled in the airplane that morning and fired up the engines. And the wings were, they were heavily laden with 3.5 tons of fuel. They were bent down towards the taxiway. The boom tanks that you see left and right up there, they were all bent down. In fact, the fuselage was contorted so bad that I couldn't even get the canopy in it. And I thought, we never had this much fuel in it. It's a frail airplane. I mean, the carbon fiber was as thin as a sheet of paper and bonded left top and bottom to Nomex paper honeycomb. The press called it the paper airplane, and they're almost right. But the airplane was twisted so much that the canopy wouldn't fit. And this morning, the engines were running, and the press was there, and we had clearance to go around the world, and I couldn't get the canopy in the airplane. So with a fist and pounding it real hard, we finally popped it into position. And I thought, boy, I may have been better off if I couldn't get it in there. I called the tower that morning and said, Edwards Tower, this is Voyager 1. Sir, we're ready to go. And he says, Voyager 1, this is Edwards Tower. ATC clears Voyager 1 from Edwards Air Force Base to Edwards Air Force Base via flight plan route. Maintain 8,000. Cleared for takeoff, and Godspeed.
Voyager's takeoff holds the record as the longest takeoff roll in Edwards Air Force Base history. It took 2 minutes and 14 seconds before Voyager would lift off. Nothing involving the flight would be easy. Each day was filled with drama.
We had this thing made. Hey, Gina, we're fatter than a 40-pound robin. We got this thing made. Well, I never had said that because there was something that ruled the whole project. It was called fate. Fate says, I'm going to let you have this project, but you're going to earn every bit of it. Within 20 minutes after that, we almost went into the ocean with both engines dead from fuel starvation. See the main boom tanks? The wing that sticks out from there are 3 different separate tanks in each wing. Now, there's one in the outboard third. And those 2 tanks were full at takeoff, and we never touched them. So the fuel ought to be there. And that's why I was confident. All we have to do is transfer it into the tank that's right in the fuselage so the engines can get to it, and then we can make it. Simple thing. So we selected number 8 on the right, number 8 on the left with our fuel selector dial and reached up and turned those 2 little tiny switches on that would turn on those transfer pumps. Now, when you do that, there's 3 things that can happen. 3 things can happen when you turn the switches on, and 2 of them are really bad. We turned them on, and I turned on the right one, and I saw a flash of light over there. And the shaft sheared, the pump froze, and it never pumped another drop of fuel. So that meant that all the fuel in that tip was trapped. Now, the left one, it may have enough fuel in it. Maybe we can get 28 gallons out of the left tank. So I saw it transferring, and we sat there and watched it, and no more than 2 or 3 gallons came in, and then bubbles started. And more bubbles, and pretty soon the tank was empty. And it confirmed the fact that we did have a leak in that tank. And I could see a little wetness around the cap, but I didn't think much of it. You know, a drop, drop, drop. You can empty an ocean with an eyedropper if you have enough time and some place to put it. And that tank was empty. Now, not only were we not going to Mojave or New York or Paris, we didn't have enough available usable fuel on board the airplane to find a lighted runway. From 1 minute of adulation to the next minute, we're going to lose the airplane, and we're going to lose our lives. In the dream, I landed in a dry lake. In this nightmare, we're going to land in the ocean, and there's no surviving a ditching with this airplane in the ocean. It would come apart just like tissue paper.
But they solved the problem, and after more than 9 days of flying near death's door, it was time to come home. Not having seen a newspaper or heard a news broadcast, the crew had no idea they had captured the hearts of America and the world. They had no idea that tens of thousands of people had lived each day of the flight with them and would be standing by, either in person or near a television, to await the completion of this remarkable adventure.
And so I thought, they may not even let me in. I can't remember asking for permission. And I thought, gee, maybe there won't be anybody there to give us a ride back to our cars that we left back in Mojave. So I crossed my fingers and I keyed the mic button. It says, Edwards Tower, this is Voyager 1. It says, sir, we're about 20 minutes out, and I know you're really busy, and I don't want to interfere with any of your flight test activities. But if you just kind of let me circle around and land on the northern dry lake, I'd really appreciate that. And I crossed my fingers and says, oh, please let me in. You know, feel sorry for me. And the tower operator came back and he says, Voyager 1, this is Edwards Tower. He says, sir, we have canceled flying for today, and we're all here waiting for your return. And a few minutes later, I looked up, and the undercast came away, and then what was presented to us was that beautiful dry lake. This is aviation's hallowed ground, where Chuck Yeager broke the sound barrier and recovered our first space shuttle. And all the early jet development happened in this place. And I thought, man, and then I saw all the people. There was tens of thousands of people that came up from Los Angeles, and they lined the western dry lake for us. And I thought, wow, for us, for this little home build, why would they be interested in that? Then I realized, you know, that I got to make a good landing down here. And if I mess this up, there's a lot of people down there with a lot of film that I can't buy it. Then I realized something else, too, that this wasn't Dick or Gina's or Bert's program. This is the work of a lot of dedicated people, and they were all down there waiting for us, and they made this thing possible. Anyway, we circle around, and then we're all about ready to land, and somebody says, hey, Dick, if you wait another 20 minutes, it'll be 8 o'clock, and you'll have an even 9 days. I thought, hey, that's cool. And so after flying all these hours, we circled around for another 20 minutes, and Gina cranked that landing gear down for the last time. And at 8:03, turned out, base, final, and touchdown, and rolled to a stop in front of the crowd. And it was 9 days and 3 minutes and 44 seconds. And it's the first ever non-stop, non-refuel flight. And it was done by who? It was done by a bunch of EAAers who just thought that they could do anything they could dream about as long as they worked really hard and they didn't give up. And that's the essence of the story.
The Voyager flight was not Dick Rutan's first adventure, nor his last. He's a highly decorated Vietnam veteran, a hero, and a patriot. As a United States Air Force fighter pilot, he flew 325 combat missions in Vietnam. On his last mission over North Vietnam, he was hit by enemy ground fire and was forced to eject from his burning F-100. Before retiring from the Air Force in 1978, Lieutenant Colonel Rutan had been awarded the Silver Star, 5 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 16 Air Medals, and the Purple Heart. More recently, Dick has flown around the world in his Long Easy, this time with many stops. Bailed out of the Global Hilton on an attempt to fly a balloon around the world, his 3rd life-saving parachute jump, and has been rescued from the top of the world after his sightseeing airplane crashed through thin ice at the North Pole. Dick is now beginning a new chapter in his life of adventure as the chief test pilot of the Easy rocket. Dick has received hundreds of awards and honors, including the Collier Trophy, aviation's most prestigious award. Another of Dick's proud accomplishments is his involvement as a spokesman for the Experimental Aircraft Association's Vision of Eagles education programs. Through these programs, Dick has spoken to thousands of students, encouraging them and their teachers. The entire Voyager project was made possible by individuals willing to work hard and take a chance. From engine development to the headsets that saved the hearing of the pilots, to those in mission control monitoring the weather, this was a project of teamwork, where a small army of just over 100 volunteers, without government assistance, made the impossible possible. Dick says adventure is the essence of life, and he's always ready to jump into or out of the next adventure. The Voyager flight was a remarkable achievement. The absolute world records set back in 1986 remain unchallenged today. Dick enjoys sharing his stories of dreams, desire, dedication, and determination, and looks forward to speaking to your group. Please call the number on this tape and speak to the representative about booking Dick Rutan for your next event. And until you hear it from him in person, always remember, if you can dream it,